I am Lipan Apache. I am indigenous to this land. I am my past, present, and future. My existence, my history is an example of the hate and harm from the notion of manifest destiny. Laws, wars, rape, borders, property, ownership, government have been used to erase my people, but we use our traditional knowledge for guidance. Just 40 years ago, the United States government passed the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, which in their eyes legalized Native ceremonies, despite our 500 years of performing, observing, and practicing. Today, our tools are locked up in museums or between pages of books. So for us, Sage is a sacred tool, a medicine that leads us through prayer to release, surrender, and create the circumstances around us. Sage is of the earth, and when it transforms to smoke, it carries our request to the 7 directions. But I don't own these tools. We don't own them because they have been provided to us from the earth, and the instructions have been passed down to us from our elders. Today, we use these tools the ways they were historically intended to be used, to heal. I harbor the pain and anger of the genocide of my people in my DNA, but only use this knowledge to restore and educate so that this harm will not be done again.
This is the assembly. According to the internet, an assembly is a group of people gathered together in one place for a common purpose. It also means the action of getting people together as a group for a common purpose. We invite you into this circle, this assembly, this conversation, and we invite you to take action and gather online and in person and further engage in conversation to grow this dialogue for the sake of our collective story. This is the common purpose we are holding in this space, that the poet, singer, activist, camera crew, the expert, and the audience have something to contribute to the greater dialogue that can transform and heal us all. Thank you.
What's up, everybody? I'm your girl, Erica Williams-Simon, but you can call me E because we're family now. I don't know about you, but I really need to feel some love nowadays. We're living in a moment when it seems like vitriol and hatred are flourishing. I remember seeing the images of Charlotte cross my timeline months ago, and when I saw them, I had the same feeling that I have every time I hear about the killing of another trans woman, or anytime I see the rape threats online whenever a woman decides to speak up and use her voice. Or when I hear about modern-day slavery or the shooting of another innocent Black man. What do we do with all of this hate? How do we make sure that in the process of trying to end it, it doesn't swallow us whole? That's what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to do it assembly style. We've got you at home. We've got a room full of brilliant, passionate people. And to help us kick off the conversation, we've got a few friends. So I'm really honored to be sitting up here today with trans activist, writer, and host, Ashley Marie Preston. Yay, give it up for Ashley, y'all. Sahari Espinoza Salamanca, founder and CEO of Dreamers Roadmap.
Sarahi.
Sarahi, got it, Sarahi.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting me.
You're welcome.
We've got next to me, Tracy Broughton, an entrepreneur, trainer, and Miss America 2011.
Ooh.
Welcome, Tracy. All the way down on the end, we have scholar and peace promoter, Shibli Telhami. And last but certainly not least, we have our OG assemblywoman, Rosario Dawson. All right, so I want to kick it off. We have a lot of conversations nationally about the issue of hate. But I think one of the things that's very different about the Assembly is that we all try to come from a personal place first. We understand that before we are political actors, we are humans, right? So when was the first time you remembered experiencing or becoming aware of hatred?
I was in elementary school, and the kids started throwing mud at me and saying that it matched. And I just had no clue because my mother never raised me in looking at colors or one way or another. So I was so oblivious to even what that was. And I just remember going home and speaking to my mom about it. But just to think that they thought that I was mud, was the first time that I recognized it.
Mm-hmm.
My family is Arab. They're nominally Christian in a village that had mostly Druze and Muslims in a country that was mostly Jewish. And so I was very aware of the differences. One of the things that you become aware of as a child is when you are getting close to people. So you're a minority, but you're getting along with the majority, and you're doing it well, and they love you, and you love them, and you're playing together, and suddenly you're one of them, and say, "Are you sure you're not Druze? Are you sure you're not Jewish? Are you sure you're not Muslims? Are you sure you're not this and that?" And then you really become aware of that they're seeing you through another prism of difference. And that's not hate, right? It's prejudice, but it's built in even among people who love you, even among people you're playing with, even among people you care about. That's something that I think we all feel, particularly people who have hyphenated identities, and I think most people have hyphenated identities.
Yeah, for me, it was my senior year of high school. I came to this country, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 4 from Mexico with my parents. And I think throughout my whole time in school, I just felt like an American kid. I picked up the language quickly. All my little friends were just like me. But when I applied for FAFSA, I was denied because I didn't fill out the Social Security section. So I call my mom in Mexico and I tell her, give me my number because I need to finish this application. She's like, well, you don't have one. So that's kind of like a reality that a lot of dreamers in this country face. And unfortunately, a lot of us find out too late to be able to do anything. And when we go to people who are supposed to know, for example, me, my counselor, had no idea, and goes beyond to say, people like you don't go to college. Which then, little things like that, I then found there was a lot of hate for immigrants. And that was the first time that I started realizing what it meant to be an undocumented immigrant trying to pursue a higher education.
Even as a trans woman, I don't know that I remember my first time because before I was a trans woman, I was born a Black male in America. And so we learn to be conditioned into the hate, and we're told that the hate, we're gaslighted and told us that the hate isn't in fact hate, it's concern, or it's the need to keep everyone safe or the need to keep order and peace. And so, but I do remember a specific incident in school when that reality hit me, no pun intended. There was this boy, his name was Johnny, I couldn't make this up, and I always got a lot of attention from the teachers because I was the really young, effeminate Black boy that, and there was no word for transgender identity in Kentucky in the late 80s, early 90s. So, but they knew that I was different. And so they would try to reinforce how special I was. And they would try to protect me and shield me. But to the other students, sometimes it made them feel like that I was a favorite. And so this boy walked up to me after a teacher told me how well-spoken and articulate I was, which I wouldn't know until years later that that's kind of problematic to an extent, because you weren't telling Sally that, and you weren't telling Brittany that, and you weren't telling Kelly that either. And so Johnny walks up, and out of nowhere, he just hits me in the face as hard as he could. And as I tasted that bitter taste of blood in my mouth for the first time, I knew that that wouldn't be the last time that I tasted discrimination and hatred.
I just want to say I find it interesting that everyone's also sharing stories of the hate that they experienced outside of themselves. And I think it's really important to explore the hate that you first felt yourself when you hated towards someone, so that you can actually relate to what that feels like, being molested at a young age, being raped at a young age, and that being among people who were supposed to be protecting me. And those being the first time that I felt rage and real fear and anger and hate, that my childhood was corrupted, and it wasn't like the bad boogeyman in the corner, it was the people that tell you that they love you. The people who are right there for you. And so I want to make sure that as we explore hate, that we don't do what we're talking about keeps happening to us, is that we make it other. We recognize that hate because we feel it ourselves, and we got to tap into that anger and tap into that hatred and exorcise it to show people the different way of getting out. Because I could tell you, I've been really angry and been really hateful, and it's been a really long journey in recognizing how corrosive that has been to my own self-environment. That stuff that I saw out there that I still mimicked, because you mimic what you see, especially if you don't look at it.
When I think about my first time really recognizing hate, it was actually seeing it directed towards my father, right, who was a 6'5", big, dark-skinned Black man, just cuddly as a teddy bear inside. But I went to this predominantly white school, And I saw my teachers whispering about him, and they didn't want him to come pick me up in the evenings. And the kids were talking, and it made me so angry and filled with rage that it transformed me. So I'm curious, any of your experiences, kind of like what Rosario just started talking about, what did your experience with hate, whether it be that first one or an ongoing experience with hate, what did it do to you?
It ruined any sense of boundaries that I had, because I'm kind of the mindset that I don't know that kids quite know how to hate at such a young age. And so I just thought that that's what you do when you love someone. Like, yes, this is my family member, but they're sexually molesting me, because that's what you do to people that you love. And so I didn't actually know that these things didn't happen to other kids, and that this wasn't the narrative of other people who looked like me or who didn't look like me. And so really there was this sense of normalcy. The anger came actually when I was like, in my adolescence, early adolescence. It was the time when I knew something was wrong. I actually started developing even breast at like 9 years old. And so there was some kind of hormonal imbalance, and I was angry and I hated my sister because I didn't understand why God made sure that she was put together completely and I wasn't. And I didn't understand what I had did to deserve. And then when I would hear people make jokes about my actual life, like, I'm from Kentucky as it is, so that's enough. And then and then people would make jokes about, like, you know, oh, like, your mother's really your sister and all of this. And they started making incest jokes and all these things. And so it was like I got to find out in the middle of certain jokes or things that my life was not normal, and that God doesn't make mistakes, you know, like, you're who you're supposed to be. And I'm like, and I'm no goddamn mistake. So who I am is valid, and I deserve to be here, and I deserve to be seen.
One of the things that I'm grappling with as we were talking here is whether hate is the right word to capture all of that we're talking about. Exactly. Because, you know, I think we all have rage. We all have anger. We all wish some people weren't where they are, and sometimes maybe even that they didn't exist. Many of us are angry with our president. I am very angry with our president. I am outraged by some of the things that are happening. So outraged that I'm obsessed with it almost, to the point. Do I hate him? I don't think so. And at some level, I pity him. At some level, I see a disturbed person who is grappling for recognition and acceptance. And it terrifies me that I can sympathize with him, even as I'm outraged with him. And look, if you face humiliation, you probably have faced hate, because obviously the condition of humiliation is probably the thing that energizes you more than anything else. And unequal relationships that are humiliating are probably where you're going to find hate the most. It's like, I study conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, and you do have hate. But what I see in all of this, it's fluid. It's not constant. It's not a given. It's not like people are made out of good and evil. It's not like we are all capable of hating and loving, being outraged and being angered, and then shifting. Among Israelis and Palestinians in the 1990s, when people were very, very hopeful about peace, if you ask Palestinians, do you support attacks against Israelis, the overwhelming majority said no when they were in the middle of promising peace. When you ask Israelis, do you support expelling Palestinians, the overwhelming majority said no. And then overnight, the peace collapses, they're fighting each other, and then you do a poll, and the next morning you have an expression of hate. They're all alike, yes, killing is okay. And they're all alike, expelling all of them is okay. You have a majority. So I think we have to grapple with the fluidity of our feelings, and also to separate our rage and anger from our hate. I find it hard to know, when I see somebody who is so resentful or hateful, to find how much is this really hate, how much of it is their insecurity and the fear, and that they think that we're going to assault them. And that's why I believe you can't defeat hate with hate. It's just not possible.
Then how do you define hate?
I don't think anybody can define it for you. And I think that's been the problem. people's failure to recognize their privilege and recognize that you're not going to experience the world in the same way that a woman is going to experience the world, as a trans person is going to experience the world, as a Black person. When we have conversation around what racism looks like, anti-Blackness is a completely different brand of racism. It looks completely different, especially in America. And so it really, for me, hate has been anything, that emotion that can't be overcome by forgiveness and compassion and love and understanding. I hate Donald Trump. I will never feel personally that there's this compassion or this, like, I understand, because I don't understand. Like, there are too many opportunities to become aware of how your actions have harmed most of our country, like, unless you are of the 1%.
I don't know if we need to have a definition of hate. I think that is what gets us out of it. It's like the excuse. It's the symptom instead of the problem. And like she was saying, if we don't start studying ourselves and personal development and figuring it out, we can't change anything because we're just blaming hate. And so I've been through so much, from homeless, just hate for my disability, for a single mom, for Black, for a woman, for all of these things. And if I just always focus on they just hate me, then we never get to the root of the problem. And if we start to focus on and call it what it really is, that someone's insecure, they're angry, or they see more in you than they do in themselves, and all the things that may cause hate, then we can start to really solve the problem instead of just talking about it and that's all we do, and we don't actually move forward to something that's solving it.
Sometimes I feel exactly like you. I mean, in the sense that
I
how can I even look for about Donald Trump? That's the wonderful thing, is each one of us is going to experience these things differently, and there is no one way to do it. When I'm referring to hate, I'm talking about something constant. In a way, it's something that I can't modify.
For me, my experience has been the three most hated demographics in America other than the Muslim experience. I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm a trans woman. And so think about those experiences on a single plane, and imagine what that would look like amplified 3 times over. And then what happens is when you speak up for yourself and you advocate, then you're gaslighted and you're told that you're angry and you're the problem and you're full of hate and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And so when we talk about hate, going back to your point, it really is about kind of taking a look at the undercurrent, looking at what's really going on under there. And so there's more than one emotion at one time. There's fear, there's uncertainty, there is distrust. I don't trust you to help me, because every time somebody says that we're going to come and help you and speak up and advocate, they come with their own brand of diet woke. You know what I mean? Like activism is the new chihuahua in a handbag. It's the new blingy case. And so a lot of hate for me stems from distrust. I don't trust people.
When I started sharing my story publicly, because I was so scared to even share that, when I actually found out, like, what does it mean and what am I? Why are people saying, like, people like you? I shared my story nationally, and I started getting all this hate mail online, right? Like, you don't belong here, go back to your country, you're an illegal, you're an alien. And at first, I was, like, really hurt, because I'm like, this is all I know as my home. Like, where do you want me to go? And I remember, like, I would, like, sit by myself and cry, like, so much, because I'm like, well, where am I supposed to go, I'm sorry. I feel, despite the fact that I don't have the financials or maybe the degree of knowledge to give someone, I have my faith. And I remember reading these people's comments and being like, there's something wrong. They just don't know. They don't have the facts. Let me do my research. Let me tell you. And I remember I was trying to answer to, like, every comment. Like, okay, what is this person focusing on? Okay, they're talking about, like, okay, like, I need to go back to my home. Like, no. Like, Mexico was, like, like America. Then you guys came and took it. Like, I wanted to, I wanted to give facts to everyone, right? Yeah. But I got to a point where I'm like, I'm coming from a place of love, despite the fact that you're giving me hate, because that's what I was taught from my mother. Like, to turn the cheek and turn the other cheek. But even though I'm giving you all these facts, they're still closed-minded. And I'm grateful for the wisdom that my mom gave me for that, to be like, look beyond what they're saying. What are they feeling? Where were they raised? What did their parents tell them to, like, that's the Black and that's the white? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what makes this election cycle and everything that's come after it so interesting is that we played by all the rules. Yeah. And so I was never this vocal before November the 8th. I was always trying to play by respectability politics put into place by people who don't respect anybody in this room. And so I think that was when I understand like that kind of like spiritual, like I'm going to model, right, what it looks like to be inclusive, what it looks like to be accepting, what it looks like to be a whole person. And the scariest thing for me at least had to have been, and I think you're experiencing this now, is when you've done that and you've played your part, when do we go into arms? At what point do we stop turning? Because when we turn the cheek, we have 24 dead trans people. 97% of them are African American. And no one is here to save us. And so it was this thing where I had to, like, it was this thing of, okay, no one's coming.
I don't think it has to be one or the other. And many people died for civil rights. Many people died for a lot of changes in this country from grassroots. It's having one side and the other combined. And I think sometimes we just do one or the other, and that barricades so many people from coming together, like he was saying, because we're all just coming from our own perspective instead of looking at everybody's.
But the institutions were built to divide us.
Oh, for sure.
And built for us not to look at it. And we've been growing up in a very hypocritical conversation around tolerance and awareness, but with very little action that was built into it. And this is a generation that's accepting, that's going, why are you telling me these horrible stories about the debt that you're in from your education, and that you then worked for some company that made it millions of dollars for free as an intern, and you got spanked in the ass, and you had to give your coffee like this, they never learned your name, and you never got to say anything. That's terrible. I think there's a lot of erasure in that and kind of going, it's just this November 8th. I think there's been a lot of people, dreamers were hitting the streets when Obama was deporting 2 million people and going, pay attention. We're calling him deporter-in-chief. Where are you guys? Because the people who are supposed to be our allies are not really being that. And I can completely understand. Bring back Barack, like I completely get that. But I'm traveling around the world. We were just in Egypt together. And like, you know, it's very interesting to actually listen to folks and go, you don't have the same perspective that we're on the same side, we're in the same conversation, we're in the same dialogue. And you can appreciate the significance of having Barack Hussein Obama as our, 44th president. But you also want me to acknowledge your pain and suffering and what that looks like to be on the other side of the receiving end of a drone strike, and what that looks like to be on the other side of those sanctions, and what it looks like to have given someone an award for a Nobel Peace Prize and then for 8 years was at war. What it looks like when you're seeing right now everyone hugging up on the bushes and going, I guess because he's less evil than Trump, that then we're going to completely go, it's completely okay, weapons of mass destruction, invading Iraq and Afghanistan, torture in Guantanamo, at what point, where do we draw that line? And I think because we're so afraid to have those conversations and really acknowledge just how bad it's actually really been, and really, that we have been taught this deference, this idea that there's just certain things that we're not supposed to say, and then at other times we're supposed to be up in arms.
Purity politics. There's these
it's this really weird thing.
See, people don't, and this is not just Americans, I don't believe so. I don't think this is just modern folks. I think as humans, we don't know how to live with complexity. Right, and live in complexity. Even what you were just talking about now, like this and that, not either or, right? We can talk about how we feel in our heart and our intentions, then we also talk about our actions and what that looks like in the world. We can love Barack Hussein Obama as a cultural figure and an icon, and then also, acknowledge all of the destruction that he was absolutely a part of by still representing empire, right? But it's easy to say that. It's easy to sit here and say both and. But when you go out in the world, how do you live in that complexity? What do you do?
This society, or I think society as for humans, was meant to divide us. Let's change that. If we're not happy with how the system is, if we're not happy how trans women are being treated, how dreamers are being treated, let's change that. And how do we change that? For me, I think being an immigrant, being a Latina, being a dreamer, I'm a green card holder now, but when I become a citizen, what I plan to do to change, I'm running for office. Because that's how we change it. I feel like we're always so mad, why is this politician doing that? Why is that person? But we don't go out to vote, and we don't run for office. If you want to see the change, I think you have to be that change. And I kind of live that model, right? Oh, you want to see be the change you want to see in the world, and I want to embrace that and really take that to heart. And I think from here, your struggles that you're facing, we Dreamers need to join your struggle and you need to join ours.
I think we need a more radical change than being a part of this system. This system is broke completely, and we need a totally different outlook, a completely different change. We can't be a part of something that corporations define our laws and everything. It's all about money. It's not about what humanity is or what the real things and values are. And so I encourage you to be a part of a completely different system and not a part of this broken system.
Please give a big assembly welcome to vocalist and activist Ray Zaragoza and special guest Kolan Studi.
This song is about how we should all be fighting for each other and having each other's backs and treating each other like a brother or a sister. And yeah, this is Fight for You.
Save the rivers, save the seas, save the mother and her family. How can you take what you want and say that we are free? If you put oil in the water, we won't sit quietly. And we were singing, stand up for what's right. Don't walk silently into the night. Take my hand and we'll see this through. If you fight for me, I'll fight for you. Save the oceans and the streams. Save the people who are in need. How can you do what you want and say you come in peace? If you don't open your eyes, how can you see? And we were cheering, stand up for what's right. Don't walk silently into the night. Take my hand and we'll see this through. If you fight for me, I'll fight for you. And don't look down when we march downtown for some truth. 'Cause you can't complain if you don't find a way to stand up to. Stand up for what's right. Don't walk silently into the night. Take my hand and we'll see this through. Stand up for what's right. Don't walk silently into the night. Take my hand and we'll see this through. If you fight for me, I'll fight for you. If you fight for me, I'll fight for you.
Thank you so much.